Hi, CPHR candidates, congratulations. You passed the exam and now it's time to apply for your for your experience validation assessments. Sorry. I get so many people reaching out to me, asking me for tips and tricks about this and how to do this. So I thought it might be a great idea to record a video, definitely more efficient than speaking to several people over and over again. So I'm sharing this video for everyone who is a CPHR candidate who is looking at doing their EVA to help you, to give you an idea of the things you need to do to be able to pass that EVA. Hopefully this doesn't take too long. If it does, I might split it into two parts, but please just stay with me. Okay, so the first thing, of course, that I always say to everyone is the CPHR website is your first port of call for any questions. You should always go there. There's a lot of information there. Before you reach out to someone, go through it so that when you're reaching out to someone, you're asking questions, having gone through the information that is already provided. It can be a bit frustrating for people to repeat the same information that you can actually find, on the CPHR website. It's not an effective use of your time or the other person's time. So I'm going to start screen sharing now so I can show you a few things before I then go on to talk about doing the actual EVA. Okie dokie. So this is the EVA website, the CPHR website, talking about the experience validation assessment. Now, typically, I've already gone there, but I'm sure you know where to get there from your CPHR designation, experience validation assessment, and then you get to this page. This page has a lot of information that tells you, gives you links to things that can help you as you start to prepare. First of all, we'll have the EVA guide, which highly recommended. It gives you a general idea of what CPHR is looking for as they assess your submission. The competency framework guide. Hopefully you should already know about this because you passed the exam, right? So, and this is what the exam is based on. But you need to refer to this again as you start to do your EVA. The registration manual that you can look at later. Senior path, that's probably not relevant for a lot of you watching this video. That's usually for people who don't go through the exam route, but have years of experience, at least 10, and they want to go directly to applying for their EVA. There's a supervisor signature page. We'll talk about that later. And then an FAQ that is also very useful. So I'm going to go right on now to the CPHR competency framework. And I need to check that you can actually see this specific screen because I am not sure that you are. So I'm going to stop sharing and then share again. So I'm not talking and then you're not seeing what I'm seeing. Okay, great. So this is the competency. This is the handbook really for the whole EVA thing. You can see this at the beginning. I'll just show you. This is the competency framework. Now we're going to go straight to where it talks about the validation of experience. This is really what we want to look at. I'll expand the screen so you can see what I'm doing. Now, a few things are really critical here. First of all, when you pass your CPHR exam and you become a CPHR candidate, you need at least 3 years of experience, a maximum of 1 at the administrative level and at least 2 at the strategic level before you can apply for your experience to be validated. So if you're an immigrant who's had lots of experience in Nigeria prior to coming to Canada, then that's all right. You can go straight away to apply because your experience from Nigeria or any other place where you've worked also counts. However, if you are a fresh graduate who's just finished school and has probably just started work, then you cannot apply for your EVA immediately. You have to wait at least 3 years. And those 3 years have to be 3 years of work where a minimum of 2 years has been done at the strategic level. This is very important. So what does that mean? Work done as an HR coordinator, maybe even as an HR generalist, depending on the level of work that you do might not qualify you to apply for your EVA. Typically, you're looking at work done either as a senior HR generalist or even a generalist where maybe you've worked in a very small organization where a lot of work was put on your table and you were actually doing more of a business partner or advisor role. So, but I would say that at a minimum, 2 years as an HR advisor or a BP is what you need to be able to effectively apply for this and be sure that your application will scale through. These things are expensive. You don't want to do it more than once. So back to the framework and the requirements. As you can see from the screen here, I've already talked about this minimum of 3 years of work experience. I forgot to mention in the last 10 years. So any work done more than 10 years ago would not count for this. Now, very important as well, where people are wearing multiple hats, maybe you're an HR and admin person or something like that. At least 51% of the work you've done must be in the HR space for it to qualify for this. But typically, most people are really fully HR, so that doesn't really come into play. Also very important, your experience that you're submitting must demonstrate that you are competent in at least 8 of the 9 HR competencies. This is very, very important. So let's look further down into that. Now, these are the 9 HR competencies that they're referring to: employee and labor relations, total health and wellness, inclusion, diversity, and human connections, total rewards, learning development and succession planning, workforce planning and mobility, HR technology and analytics, innovation, organizational change, and development. These are the 9 competencies that your EVA must speak to at least 8 of them. Okay, let's go further. I'm going to use just one of them as an example. Whatever I say for the one would apply to everyone in terms of how you should present the information when you're submitting your EVA. Now, let's just use the first one there, employee and labor relations. Now, under employee and labor relations, you see this is 1.1. There are subtitles. So here they just give you a very brief idea of what they're looking for there. Someone who builds and maintains relationship with employees and their representatives, if it's labor relations, in alignment with organizational goals. Now, within this broad category, there are 4 competencies that you are expected to show in order to achieve the designation. Your submission can speak to any one of this, or more than one if you have that. The first one, 1.1.1, support the development of collective employment contracts and agreements, ensuring compliance with applicable legislation and the organizational strategic plan. Point 2, if required, act as a representative of parties before the relevant administrative bodies. Point 3, promote a collaborative work environment between the employer, the union, if applicable, employees, and any other representative groups. And then the 4th one, interpret legislation, collective agreements where applicable, and policies consistent with legal requirements and organizational values to treat employees in a fair and consistent manner. So essentially, if you wanted to speak to this competency, you need to look for an example. Now, backtrack a bit. In submitting your EVA, what they want is for you to submit examples or scenarios where you have worked, things that you have done that show your competency in the specific areas. So, and one other thing to mention, when you're doing this, the best way for you to bring this across is to use the STAR method. The same STAR method we use when we're doing interviews: situation, task, action, results. That's the way you need to present the information or present the scenario that you're going to use to show that you have the competency that you're writing about. So, like I said, you could speak to any of the 4. Perhaps, you have an example that shows that you've supported the development of, collective agreements or employee contracts that enable compliance with applicable legislation and the organizational plan. So if you have that, you can put together your story and let it speak to that, or any of the other 4 things that are there. Now, further down, it tells you the knowledge and the skills that they expect that scenario that you're going to write about to show, that would tell them that this person is worthy of the CPHR designation. Now, I'm not going to read through all of it. You can read it when you go on the site yourself. But essentially, what this means is that the story you're going to craft or the example you're going to write about has to demonstrate a significant number of this. Obviously, it's probably not practical to expect that it would demonstrate every single one. There are probably like 10 or 11 or even more than that here. And depending on which competency it is, the numbers will vary. But typically, I say that you want to have your scenario speak to at least about half of this thing. So you really need to take time to, write down the story, first of all, freehand, just as it comes to you, the example that you want to use, the situation that you've worked in. And then your second and subsequent rounds should be about rewriting it in a way that it speaks to the things that they're looking for here. Now, obviously, this has to be things that you have done. So this is why you need to really think about this properly before you do it. Now, there is a second part, which is very, very important. There are competencies that they also want to see that will reflect advanced human resources knowledge and practice. Honestly, the more of this second part that you can show in your story, the better positioned your submission will be. Yes, you want some of the first part, but you want more of the second part. So again, this is not something you do in a hurry. Submitting your EVA is a process that can probably take you at least 4 to 6 weeks. That is, if you're dedicating, I would say maybe 2 to 3 hours to it, every other day or something, because you first of all have to write down the stories, the scenarios you want to use. And then you have to rewrite it. There will be several drafts, several rewrites to ensure that you are capturing and showing the reader all the things that they're looking for here. You need to show them these competencies that reflect the advanced human resources practice, and I won't bother reading them, as well as the other one that we talked about earlier, the knowledge and the skills for each item that you want to speak to. Now, this is very important. You must not gloss over this. Write the story in such a way that the person reading it does not need to speak to you to get an understanding of what exactly you're saying. Remember, you are not going to be there for them to ask you questions. So your submission has to be so explicit that they do everything. And as a question is coming to their mind, they can see the answer in what you have written. The story you write must showcase that you have this competency in the specific areas that they're looking for. For example, they want to see that you're able to uphold, promote, and communicate laws, policies, and best practices in employee and labor relations applicable to the organization. So if you were writing about this, your story should show, or the scenario that you're providing should show how you communicated the laws or the policies within, the assignment that you took or the task that you did. The best practices that you highlighted within the policy that you wrote, and the relationship to the labor laws or the employment standards. Again, for emphasis, you cannot assume. Specificity is very important here. You cannot just write fluff and gloss over things. Your examples must be specific. Let me illustrate what I mean. So if you're going to say, for example, like this first one, don't just put in the evaluation that in your submission that you submitted a policy, you wrote a policy for your organization. What was the policy about? For example, was it a harassment policy? What were the key aspects of the harassment policy that needs to be stated? The reason why you need to be very specific in your submission It's because they want to be sure that you actually did this, that you're not just putting a story together. And it is those specific, those details that you give that would assure them that you actually did this. So it's very, very important. Now, again, I must mention that there is a word count limit. So this is where, you have to be succinct, but ensure that you capture the relevant information. And yes, almighty AI. I honestly encourage you to use the AI tools, ChatGPT, Copilot, whatever you use, not to craft your stories, but to help you to be able to, make it more succinct, make it sound more professional, whatever it is, the prompts that you need to get your story down to the required number of words while still ensuring that you capture the essence of what you need. So I'll give you an example of how to use, ChatGPT for this. Once you've written the initial story, redone the drafts as many times as you think, and you have what you think is like your best effort to date that captures everything that you want to capture. Put that into ChatGPT. Copy this knowledge and skills and the advanced competencies that they say they want to see. Essentially, if you were writing for this specific competency, copy either 1 of 1, 1.1 of 1, or 4 up to 4, whichever one you're working on, as well as this knowledge and skills and this competencies that reflect advanced knowledge. Copy all that into ChatGPT. Upload your scenario as well, and then ask ChatGPT to write it to fit X number of words, to make it more sustained, to make it sound more professional, whatever it is that you want it to do. And then, of course, whatever output ChatGPT gives you, you need to read it over and ensure that it actually meets what you want before you then put it in the document. So that is really all that is required for this. Talking about it, it makes it sound like, it's not a lot, but I can assure you from experience and the experience of so many other people that this takes a lot of work. For each example you're going to give, I'll be surprised if you spend anything less than 5 hours, from the initial drafts to all the rewrites, the tweaking, until you get it exactly where you want it to be. So in summary, the things that are important for each scenario that you submit for your EVA are: one, it's got to speak to at least 8 of the 9 competencies within the HR framework, within the HR competency framework. Now, within each of those competencies, there are also sub-competencies. So you just need to pick, any one of them and write about it. When you're writing about it, write about it using the STAR method, so that way you ensure that you capture the situation, the tasks that was given to you in that specific situation, the actions that you took, and the results that you achieved at the end of the day. Every single one of those 4 points is very important. Do not gloss over any one of them. However, in terms of the weight within, or the amount of text that it takes within the content, the situation, I would say, should probably be no more than 2 sentences. The action, 1, because it's really just about, this is what I was asked to do. The task, 1 sentence, because that is really all about what I was asked to do. The actions you took, that is the bulk of what you would write. What are the things that you did? Several sentences, several paragraphs. And then at the end of it all, you must not forget what was the result. And again, the result has to be very, very tangible and specific. Don't just say the employees were happy. Did employee satisfaction improve? If it did, by what percentage? Based on what? Was it because you did a survey prior and after, and then these are the results? Things like that. You have to be very, very specific in terms of the results that were achieved. Use numbers as much as you can. State what you did. How did you measure? How did you find out, what that result came to be? So that is very, very, very important. I'll stop sharing the screen now. And yeah, so this is really what it's about. There is in filling the form, there is also the supervisor signature page I want to talk about that briefly because sometimes I get questions about it. It's not every single supervisor you've worked with that needs to sign. It's just your current supervisor, that just all, that needs to sign to say that at least they've looked at it and to the best of their knowledge, they believe what you have written to be correct. So that's that. And then there are also a few other things that you need to submit. They'll ask you for your job descriptions for each of your positions, the organizational chart in each organization that you worked with. And I mean, if for some of the organizations, you no longer have access to the original job description from the company itself, it doesn't really matter too much. You can, you can just get any other job description for the job title that you had in that organization and submit that. In terms of the hierarchy, you should be able to remember what the hierarchy was like. It doesn't have to be from the organization. You just need to draw, maybe in a PowerPoint or something, what the organizational structure was in that organization. So that's really it. You put all that together. Remember, you need to speak to at least 8 of the 9 competencies. My suggestion is that you pick one from each, so when you pick your 8 should be 8 different competencies. If you absolutely have to, I mean, you could take 2 from one, but if you're doing that, then it means that you're going to have more than 8 examples. And talking about the number of examples, I actually do encourage that you submit at least 10 examples, simply because you don't know, which of your examples might be a bit wonky when the assessor is reviewing it. So you want to give them enough such that if 1 or 2 of them are wonky, they still have enough, at least 8 that they need to give you that passing score that would say that, hey, you passed the EVA. You are now a chartered human resources professional in Canada, whatever your province is, other than Ontario. So I hope this was helpful. Reach out to me if you need clarification on anything else. But like I said, this really is the bulk of what you need to submit a successful evaluation, the experience validation assessment for CPHR in Canada. Thanks. See you on the next video. Oh, and yes, before I forget, if this was useful for you, please like the content and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. Thanks.